Hello and welcome to Workforce Wisdom. I'm your host, Christy Bray, Chief Customer Officer at PracticeLink. This podcast examines the latest trends in healthcare recruitment, showcasing innovative strategies, success stories, and fresh perspectives that are revolutionizing the healthcare workforce. These episodes lead to in-depth, thoughtful discussions with recognized industry-leading healthcare professionals, exploring the challenges of healthcare recruitment and beyond. Whether you're an experienced recruitment professional or just starting out, this podcast aims to help you discover how experts are reshaping the industry, leveraging technology, and fostering inclusive hiring practices. Today's episode, From Surviving to Thriving, Helping Residents on Their Journey, with my guest, Charles Lowry. Welcome, Charlie.
Hey, Christy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you again.
Thanks. You too, as always.
So Charlie serves as our Director of Provider Engagement and GME Relations at PracticeLink. In his role, he partners with physician residency programs and medical schools to inspire and empower the next generation of healthcare professionals through PracticeLink's comprehensive services. His goal is to equip the graduate medical education community with the tools needed for a successful career in medicine. Charlie joined PracticeLink after working with students and residents through his role as a statewide campus director for the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine. Charlie is a proud graduate of Berea College and earned his master's degree from the University of Charleston. Welcome again, Charlie. Your background really demonstrates an evident passion for supporting medical students and residents. What inspired you to bring that passion to PracticeLink? And what is it about this organization that made you want to join the team?
Well, I think that coming to PracticeLink, it took me a minute to decide whether this was something I wanted to do. And I'm almost at the 2-year mark with GME Relations being built up in those 2 years. And I've loved every minute of it. I can honestly say that. I think that it was a natural progression for me. I worked for a long time with international students as an international student director, and then went to the statewide campus at WVSOM as a director, working with residents. And so I feel like I just have that background. It was just natural. It was a natural progression for me. I think the role of GME at PracticeLink is very crucial and very needed. So I'm very happy to fill that role.
Well, we are definitely happy to have you. And I know that you are a road warrior going out and doing a lot of these trainings and the support you provide in person. So we really appreciate that. I'm not sure how many miles you traveled this year, but I'm sure it's a lot.
I think we may look at that at some point in December. But yeah, it's quite a few miles between air and road and whatever it takes to get there. But I love it. Travel is a huge part of my life personally. And so now it's a huge part of my life professionally.
Yeah, that's great. So you have your own podcast. So I'm excited to kind of talk about that and the topics that you cover more for those early career physicians. But what inspired you to launch Surviving and Thriving in Residency?
So, of course, our CEO had this vision of having podcasts for the company, various podcasts. And really for Surviving and Thriving, it was filling a gap. There was a need. It fills a void. And I think the big thing with Surviving and Thriving is it's real life stories. Everybody's journey is different. Everybody's story is different. You may have thousands of residents out there today working hard who all think they're doing the same thing or have been down the same road, but really they haven't. Everybody's journey is unique. And I think that having the podcast, having those residents on talking about their real life journey, it's that part of the education is missing. You can go to medical school, you can go to residency, you can study all day, you can practice, but that human element, that human side of it isn't really talked about. People don't talk about their stresses in residency, and they don't sit around and talk about the things that they talk about and that they're vulnerable talking to me about on the podcast. And so I think anyone listening, whether they're pre-med, medical student, resident, fellow, I think that's what comes through on the podcast is that sincerity, that vulnerability, just sharing the struggles that they've been through and trying to help the people that are in the pipeline behind them avoid some mistakes that maybe they made and share some wisdom to help them through a little bit easier.
Yeah. The mental health aspect of the training programs, and then even, as they go out into practice, that's often missed. I mean, you're still seeing maybe it's the burnout rate or just people choosing to change careers or take different paths. I think the past 5 years, we've really recognized how important those aspects are, not just for physicians, but for everyone, that mental health aspect. Are there any other gaps in support or education topics that you feel like residents need or get from your podcast different from their regular books and paper and reading?
I think that career readiness is huge. And I think that is the biggest gap. Christy, as many residents as I talk to in a year's time, I always ask them, have you started your job search yet? And sometimes it will be in January of the year they're graduating. And the most common response is, I've started Googling some places, but I really don't know how to start. And it's a huge percentage of them that say that. I just don't know where to start. It's very overwhelming. There's a lot of noise out there, and they're getting slammed in a million different ways. And so I think that job readiness would be something that should be incorporated into the education system for all of these trainees. So that would be a big part of it. I think there's a lack of a trusted resource for financial literacy, for job readiness, and for wellness altogether. So if somehow you could have a course on those three topics, I think that would be it.
Yeah, I know that we both work closely with our student loan consultants that we have in the PracticeLink Resource Center. And I found as a recruiter or leading a recruitment team, that finance piece was so critical into their well-being and overall happiness, because that was their biggest stress. I'm curious, as you've met a lot of these people, do you have a number? Like, what's the highest level of debt that somebody has shared with you? I'll share mine. You tell me.
It's crushing. So, the worst are couples. So I have met a few couples who are $750,000 in, and that's crushing. That's a huge burden to bear. I think the big thing about it is, whether you recognize it or not, sometimes we carry around these stressors. We know they're there, but we don't really recognize that we're carrying them around. And I think that is just something that's always on the back of your mind all through residency. And it's easy to push it back, but it's always there. That's a huge burden. So what amount?
$650, but that was one person going into primary care. It's tough though, but working through Navigate with Joy, she was able to reduce that substantially down. And I know over the years when I talk about student loans, they're typically a mortgage payment without a beach house, the value of what that loans end up. I know that in your second episode, you interviewed the student loan counselor, I think from SLU in St. Louis. And I thought that was eye-opening, just understanding. So they're accumulating the debt in undergrad and then medical school. Then in residency, they are getting paid, but they are also needing to pay those 8 years of debt. I'm sure that is the biggest stressor of anything as these folks are looking to enter practice and after training.
Such a huge stressor. And everybody does it differently, I think. I went to a conference and they had an incredible panel of folks, and they had every stage of the career. So they had a resident who was just finishing up. They had someone who had been practicing a few years. They had someone who was mid-career. And all of them were very open and willing to talk about their finances. And the amazing thing was, the resident who was finishing up had literally lived on peanut butter sandwiches through residency, any free food that was offered through the cafeteria.
Doctor's Lounge. Doctor's Lounge are always popular.
Doctor's Lounge. Yep. They saved every bit of their salary through residency that they could, and they were almost finished paying off their loans by the time they finished residency. And I was so impressed with that. And then There was someone there that was mid-career who had barely paid down on the loans at all because marriage happened and then kids happened and a bigger house and a nicer car. And, it's just that natural thought process of, I'll get to this in a minute. And a minute turned into years. And I love that part about the podcast too. It's things like that. It's these little hints and tips and things that maybe you have stress over that someone else has been through, and they're being very open and honest about it.
So we know that the finance piece carries a heavy burden for them. Are there some other prominent challenges that residents face today? And that challenge may be different from PGY1 to, when they're done. I'm curious if you see that progression in the folks you're interviewing.
Yeah, the challenges are just, of course, burnout. That's happening before they're even going into practice. It's a lot of hours. The mental health piece as well, I think, is always going to be a challenge. I think working these long hours, putting everything into this, at this point, you also have to think they've been in school forever. They've been in training forever. When you're 30, you just really want to get out of the gate and just run, right? You're like, oh, I'm done with all of this. And that's a huge mental burden as well. So I think that AI is coming into play as a challenge as well. I think that's a huge up and coming thing. But overall, I feel very positive. I think that mental health is a huge piece of this. We'll probably talk about that a million times today. I mean, I'm very passionate about that myself, whether you're in medical training or whatever, but the mental health piece, at least that's coming to light and it's being addressed, and there are avenues to have treatment, and programs are realizing that they need to address that up front on day one and have the resources available on day one. And they're making it okay to step forward and say, you know what, I'm having issues. I'm having trouble. I'm struggling, and making that okay. 10 years ago, I don't think that was necessarily the case. I think if you step forward and say, I'm struggling, that was shameful. You just didn't do that. So that's come a long way.
Yeah, I think that mental aspect, because pre-COVID, and I don't like referring to things like that, but pre-2020, if you had some type of mental health evaluation, those were typically required to be reported to the medical staff office. And so there was definitely a stigma of that. And I know through the work of the Dr. Lorna Breen Foundation, they're really working to advocate so that people understand that doctors are people too. And they need to be able to have a safe space to either report some of these things or how they're feeling. She's a physician that unfortunately took her own life. And the stress is real for these folks as they go through training and to practice.
That's the shame of it. It's like a ding on your character. Pre-COVID, it was really a ding. Oh, do we really want to work with this? I think that's just horrible to even think about.
Yeah. So do you have some ideas, I'm sure you do, about how medical schools or residency programs could better support the mental health, maybe that balance and overall well-being of these folks that they've been entrusted to train?
So I think the first thing is they need to build a culture where it's okay to ask for help. Again, from day one, it's okay to ask for help and let that be known. It's always been very competitive. We always hear the stories about the group of residents coming down the hall and the person throwing their hand up to answer every question that's being asked, And I think they need to build that culture right off from day one. I think a good mentorship program is key as well. I've seen that in person where some groups physicians will have book clubs at their homes, invite residents to their homes from day one when they come into the residency, and have it at a different physician's home each time. That incorporates them into the community. It lets them meet these folks, see real life physicians and how they're living and how they have work-life balance maybe. And outside of the work facility, they get to see this. So I think that's important. Counseling should always be available wherever you work. I think counseling should be available. And then time for rest and relaxation. 10 years has made a huge change in the training process, I think. But 10 years ago, I think residents were working a lot longer hours than they are now. But I think rest is key, having that time off, having time with family. And I think if a program supports these folks as people, that's the main thing. They're going to grow as physicians. So I think it's easy to forget, even for anyone, that it's easy just to look at them and think, well, they're going to be a physician. They'll be fine. They're going to make lots of money. They're going to do well in life. They can pay their student loans back. What you need to do is think of them as people. Think of them as yourself. They have sacrificed a lot, and there's a lot there that programs can do. I think most programs are doing a great job. I travel all the time to these programs. They're doing a great job overall. But taking care of these residents, it's definitely a mind, body, spirit thing. It's more than just looking on the outside and saying, you need to study more, you need to do this, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this. It's looking at them as a human and keeping that aspect in mind.
I agree. I've been in healthcare long enough to remember when they did cap the number of hours that they could work, because you were seeing, unfortunately, it would lead to medical errors, right? Because they were just so overworked and running on fumes. And we know that's not a safe space to provide care. You're right. That was one significant change that I can remember. I think the hard part when you're recruiting folks and you find out they get so little time off to go interview, and trying to figure out those types of pieces. I would love to see programs be more open to that. I don't know if it's having a career day. I promise you that the recruiters would come. They will pack up and they will be on campus or in that hospital, and they will talk to anyone so that it makes it easier. So if they're not having to leave town for 2 or 3 days, but I always felt bad because they would rush in, they'd rush out. We would have them run the paces from 7 a.m. to probably after dinner during a site visit, and then they fly home and go straight back into the hospital. So I don't know, that would be a fun idea for programs to consider, is actually open the doors a little bit more for those career pathways. Because you mentioned that they just don't know where to start. I got a lot of friends who would love to start that with them.
You're right. And then the other part too with that interview is the financial burden. Again, it may just be 1 or 2 nights gone from home, but that's still significant for folks. It's still a stressor, and there's money involved. And sure, maybe some facilities will pay for them to travel there, but some won't, and they're on their own dime. So it would reduce costs for them as well.
Yeah, I know that at least in the teams that I had the pleasure to lead, we did everything we could to have the hospital or the health system pre-fund their visit, from booking their ticket, having a direct pay for their car rental, hotel direct pay. So we tried to take that burden off, knowing a site visit could easily cost somebody $2,500. They don't have that. They don't have a credit card to put it on. They can't wait 6 to 8 weeks to get reimbursed from the facility. So recruiters, if you're not doing some of those things, they sound high touch, but they are not. It is super easy to set that stuff up and work through what that looks like to really roll out the red carpet for these folks. And that includes making sure they are fed and they are traveling, and they're not doing that with additional financial stress.
And how great is that for the resident? They're going to appreciate that. They're going to remember that. I think that's even a part of pre-onboarding. That's almost an onboarding piece that could contribute to longevity in the role. They're going to appreciate that if you can do that.
So I'm sure you have a story or a guest from the podcast that's left an impression on you. You probably have more than one, but give the listeners a story or two.
So one of my favorites, I had a guy on from South America who went to school, medical school, and decided he wanted to come to the U.S. for residency, but spoke zero English. He knew zero English, but he knew this is what he wanted to do. Came up to a 9 to 12 month English intensive course and learned English in about 9 months, fluent English. So from there, he applied for residency. His spouse also came, and they ended up in different residencies in different states. And that's what happens. And I think 2 years in, he actually got into a residency close to her. So they were in the same city while they were on the podcast. But then I think she was going to start a fellowship in another state altogether, miles and miles away. And I think the reason that sticks out is because I met them in person, brought them into the studio in person, and have spent a lot of time with them since. But it's just the resilience. I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And I think what an amazing physician you're going to be. None of this is a hurdle for them. None of it's a hurdle. It's a part of the journey. It's a part of their life. Are they sad about any of it? No. Well, we're going to be apart. We'll figure out when we can see each other and we'll get through it. The end result is what we're going for. And it just amazes me because sometimes I forget my password for Amazon and I'm so frustrated. And I'm like, it just puts things in perspective. Everybody's journey is different. And when you really sit down and talk to them, it really puts things in perspective for you. I try not to lose my patience when I forget my password to Amazon.
I mean, definitely the sacrifices that they are making. Anyone that is choosing to go to medical school and become a physician, it's a huge, huge sacrifice. And you do meet a lot of couples that do that journey just because of the, how the match process works in the US. And some of them would have kids. They'd live states away from each other and they had young children. And I don't even know how they manage their time or their day or their stress, but they do. They do it because they love caring for people and being able to impact people's lives.
With this couple, which is also common, is they're here with no family. They didn't know anyone in the States and they built their own community. They didn't have the option of going home for holidays or for breaks, or it just wasn't something that they could do. So I think that it's just an incredible, incredible thing. I think actually my very first guest on the podcast, absolutely beautiful soul, she was a practicing physician, a practicing doctor in South Africa, came to the U.S. and was now a resident. And just her journey is just really amazing. And it's perspective for me. It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah, the USMLE process, it's not an easy one. We definitely make it hard. Before, in your job, as you helped those international medical graduates, is there something you'd like our listeners to kind of understand about that? You mentioned with that couple that you interviewed, they can't go home on vacations and things like that. I think recruiters or people in general forget their visa status holds them here in certain ways and super expensive. They don't get the time off. And so is there anything you'd like to maybe tell the listeners that kind of helps them have a little bit more compassion for those situations that they just can't hop on a plane and go to Florida for a couple of days? It's very expensive and it takes a lot of time for them to get home.
And a lot of them are scared to go home because they don't understand the whole visa process and they're scared they may not get back into the country. So it's just the human equation. Put yourself in their shoes if you can. Think about being separated by a 8-hour plane ride from your family and not having them nearby. And you're working all these hours. You're on your own. You're eating food you're not accustomed to. As a first-year resident, really coming in as an IMG, it blows my mind because what I would say is picture yourself going to Egypt and training, not working, training for 3 years in Egypt. And of course, they want to be here and they've chosen that. But there are so many challenges, just so many challenges. It's even as a first year coming in, shopping at Walmart. That's something that they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to look for an apartment. There's a million things, just little things we take for granted day to day. So I think just always thinking, what if someone put you in a different country and you weren't comfortable, you weren't really familiar with the language 100%, and how much anxiety you would have and what kind of resources would help you better. And think of it from that perspective.
And I know I've interviewed some immigration attorneys on the show before, but much like the financial stress being there, if you have that or either one of those are probably a deal breaker for a lot of people in terms of a career choice. So what has hosting the podcast taught you about leadership and resilience in medicine, which we've talked a lot about, but What are some of the things that you've learned?
Probably as far as leadership goes, leadership is not just about talking, it's more about listening. And I think everybody's story is different. And if you sit down and you truly listen to people, I think that just makes you better in the role of leadership. I feel like a lot of the folks that have been on the podcast, they are leaders maybe without knowing it, just because they are very vulnerable and they do open up and they talk about things. And I don't know if they realize that that's part of growing into a leader, is being open and vulnerable and being willing to share and learn from your experience and teaching others from the mistakes that you made. That's a great leader, I think. So leadership from both sides of the fence. I think leadership for those folks that have been on the program, all of them are leaders in their own way. And then for me, I think it's really the listening part, just sitting and listening to them, because we talk a lot even outside of the podcast. Most of the guests have just won a place in my heart, and I've just truly, truly enjoyed it. And they've all taught me something.
I have at least one episode that there were some tears. I'll be vulnerable about that with a very close friend of mine. I'm sure you've had some tears on your podcast, right?
Oh, yeah. The struggles, and some of the residents that I've spoken with are just so sincere and so honest, just so honest about everything. And I truly can empathize with them. I have not been in their shoes, but I don't know. There's something in me that just naturally is drawn to share your journey with me. I just want to know where you've been, how you got here, where you're going, and what can I do to help you?
So as you look to do this, and those ideas came from Ken and others when you're settling into your role, did you have a goal in mind or a mission in mind? And if you did, have some of the episodes, have they surprised you, or is it kind of what you thought? Because you were with a medical school for so long, but I'm curious, in terms of a vision or a goal of what PracticeLink could provide to the healthcare training community.
I think the main thing is that you're not alone. That was one of the starting points, was sharing your journey, because a lot of residents don't want to talk about their problems. It's just a stigma, and it is fading, but there's a stigma there that you may not come across as strong if you're having problems. So I think that that's a big part. The other piece going into it when we thought about it was how to make them successful from the start. Whether you're a pre-med medical student, what resources are out there? We have a lot of resources through PracticeLink. So many great free resources for residents and trainees. But I think that hearing stories from their peers, from people who are currently going through it, that leads to true success. When you're sharing things that, again, are vulnerable, you're being vulnerable on the podcast and you're sharing that. And I think that just leads to success. And I think that's a big part of it. The goal really was just to get it out there for any resident, any medical student to listen in and hear their peers talking about things that they know they're going to go through at some point, relieving some of that anxiety. If I'm worried about student loans and I'm a second-year medical student and I'm listening to a podcast from a third-year resident talking about repaying their student loans through residency, that means the world to me as a second-year student, because that's relieving some of my anxiety. That's giving me a trusted resource. I know PracticeLink's GME podcast is going to help me in my journey and in my career, and it's a trusted resource. We've been around forever. We've been around so long. And so this podcast, I think, is just a good resource for them.
Hope you're enjoying today's podcast. Just wanted to break in here to remind you of PracticeLink's new Physician Resource Center at PracticeLink.com. To check out our Physician Resource Center, head over to PracticeLink.com today. PracticeLink's Physician Resource Center is a collected hub of content which includes valuable resources and information about contracts and compensation, the job search and interview process, quality of life and wellness, and many, many more areas designed specifically to inform and support physicians' professional growth and success. To check out our Physicians Resource Center, head over to PracticeLink.com today. Thank you for listening, and now we'll return to the podcast.
So my audience is mainly those within the recruitment sector, but what do you think your guests and these new physicians and trainees wish that their employers and recruiters understood about their experiences during training?
We've talked about work-life balance my entire career, my entire life. We've always talked about work-life balance. It hasn't always really been a thing. We just talk about it. It doesn't happen necessarily, but I do think that that's here. That is here. Work-life balance is huge for them. And I think that they would want recruiters to understand that. I think they're seeking work-life balance more now than ever. And that's understandable. They've invested their whole life into this so far. Mentorship. A lot of them are seeking mentorship. And I think that's such a crucial piece of this. If you can provide that mentorship, again, that leads to stability and longevity. And if you have good mentors out there that you can set them up with, that's crucial. And I think a lot of them are looking for that. They're looking for that piece of the puzzle. So it's not always about salary. I think most people think it is. They always want to think that it's just about salary, but it's not. And even me, I thought, well, I will see more folks that are interested in how much money they can make, but it's not always about salary.
As recruiters, I expect people are seeing that in the candidates that they interact with. They're asking about schedule, their work schedule, their call schedule. Probably this doesn't sound like a scheduling thing, but do you have a scribe and what is your EMR? All those are related to work-life balance. So all of those things really, really matter. And if your health system does those things well, promote that. Make sure that's known either in your job postings or when your recruiters are talking to candidates, because they understand if they're in a difficult EMR, what that means, the hours they have to spend charting and things like that, that takes them away from their family, from dinner, from bedtime. So all of those things I think matter. I think the other thing you said about mentorship, what I have found is the mentor usually gets more out of it than the mentee. Like you create stickiness for both as wanting to stay there in your organization. But it's fascinating to see folks when they're asked to be mentors and wherever they are in their career, most love it. I haven't met folks in medicine that aren't gung-ho about helping the future physicians or other clinicians through their work experience.
Whether you're a preceptor for medical students or you're a mentor, I always tell those folks, it will keep you on your toes. You will stay up to date on everything because having that young trainee with you, it's definitely going to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, it is. Might learn a TikTok dance or two.
You might. Yeah, you never know. You never know. But yeah, I think it's definitely a great benefit for both in the relationship.
So in your role for PracticeLink, give the listeners an understanding of how PracticeLink is really helping to bridge the gap between residency and practice readiness. Maybe even be a little specific about some of the tools that you have available to you that you bring to the programs.
We have the first practice guide. So that would be a starting point. And it goes from starting your CV all the way up to negotiating a contract and all of the steps in between. So I think that helps bridge that gap somewhat. The CV workshops have been incredible. We not only do CV workshops on site, but residents and students, fellows can email their CV to me as well, and I will go over it and send it back to them. That's been an incredible experience because I think a lot of folks are very confident in their CV, and it's always good to have a second set of eyes outside of your bubble to look at that CV. So we try to get some feedback from your side of things, from recruiters. What are you looking for in a good CV? What's going to move somebody to the top of the stack? So that's kind of where we get our feedback from. So we haven't even talked about the scholarship program.
I did want to make sure we talk about the First Practice Fund. That was just a phenomenal project that you and I and some other practice linkers worked on last year. And just super excited to be able to offer that in the spring. We launched on Doctor's Day and then made the selections in June. And I know that the deadline is coming up quick. This may not air before that, but I will tell people we are going to continue to do that. So Doctor's Day 2026, fall of 2026. So be on the lookout. I know you've interviewed all of those recipients for the podcast. Give us like a little glimpse of what just that small financial gift meant to them.
It was incredible. So the scholarship itself, the First Practice Fund, it's $2,500. So that's a huge amount of money for a medical student or a resident. The residents and the APP who came on to the podcast after winning, they were just so grateful. There's a lot to it. So again, there's also a part to that where they feel very accomplished, right? They answered these questions, essay style. They did a great job. They put their heart and soul into it. So it really boosted them as far as that part goes as well. But some of them just needed the money. They truly needed the money. When we talk about traveling for an interview, we talk about little costs that add up. $2,500 can go a long way. That can pay your rent. That can keep the light on for another month. And that study materials, so many things. But I think they were all just grateful to have the opportunity. There's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of opportunities for scholarships out there for a resident. So it was just incredible. And I met the greatest group of 6 people that won for the spring that I've stayed in touch with. And I will have them back on the program again as they progress through their journey. So it'll be fun to see where they are a year from now. And then for fall, we do have 9.
Yeah, I was going to mention that for recruiters out there, it's an incredible opportunity for your organization to be able to sponsor one of these scholarships. PracticeLink takes care of the promotion. We receive all the applications and go through them. We definitely are surpassing what we received the first time in terms of applications, but that was such a fun process to go through. And yeah, I'm super excited to get to do it again and again and again. We had an amazing sponsor step forward to sponsor 6 of the scholarships this year. We've added additional 3. So we've grown from 6 to 9 within the same year, and just super excited to have their support and obviously our founders' support as we provide those to folks.
If you're interested in sponsoring or if you want to talk about that, just reach out to us. We'd love to discuss that. It's a great opportunity to show your commitment to the trainees and your concern and your care for them, really. And I think that's, again, it's the human side. It's the human side. Let's give back. What can we do to give back to these trainees that have devoted so many years to training? It's a great way to give back to them.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. You mentioned AI a teeny little bit. How do you see technology and AI shaping medical school residency programs, kind of physician development, maybe over the next 5 to 10 years?
I can't even imagine where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years. I think AI will take over a lot. A lot of the little everyday duties that trainees have, whether it's notes, whatever it is, I think the little things will be taken over by AI. I think the big hurdle will be some type of organized training with AI. I think that's already needed and necessary. To me, I see AI right now as kind of rogue. Everybody's learning it on their own time and they're using this or they're using that, and there isn't a designated system to it. So I think within, the next 5 years, 10 years, that will be something that comes into play. AI will just be an incorporated training. Maybe there will be 1 or 2 or 3 main systems that are taught in medical school, that are taught in residency to be used. It's fascinating. I went to a conference where they had the simulations were AI. And I think they had 3 or 4 avatars that were life-size that interacted. You could ask questions. So it's amazing to see things like that, because coming from a medical school where we have a simulation lab and you go in and there's so many people that work in a simulation lab that have to pull this off and make it all go so well. It seems like we just got to the point where we have these in the sim labs, the simulation models are speaking, right? So we're behind a glass plated wall with a microphone speaking for the simulation model. And we just got to that point where they're having babies and it's more lifelike. And now all of a sudden it's AI is taking over. And so I don't know. I think it will be interesting to see, but hopefully a lot of the day-to-day busy work will be taken over effectively by AI. So the providers can focus more on the humanistic side of things. But I do think like the human side, that's going to become more and more valuable as AI develops. The empathy, AI cannot model that. They cannot provide that. So the human side will become more valuable as AI progresses.
Yeah, I agree. I think sim labs are very expensive to set up. So I don't know who the companies are that are developing, maybe that AI sim lab. That'd be kind of fun to see. But we use AI every day in the work that we do. I think of it as kind of having an assistant. You can kind of offload some of those things. And I actually don't know. I'm sure there are physician-focused AI tools being developed that they have just been informed of all of this information. Because the keyword that you said in using it is that it's effective in what they're doing. Because we can Google or ChatGPT and get it to tell us what we want it to say. But what we need it to be is to be effective and to be in that assistive capacity.
Yeah, and trustworthy, 100% trustworthy, as close to 100% as we can get.
So think back to your time working in the medical school. So if there was one aspect kind of within that, primarily medical school and that initial training, if there was one part you could redesign, what would it be and why?
I think career readiness, again. I think life skills. I think those little pieces really come together. I feel like that's missing. The financial literacy, that's missing for so many people. So financial literacy would be a huge piece of that life skill that would have to be incorporated. When I think about things like that, I always think you learn from your parents. So, a lot of people, your political party may be because that's what you grew up with, right? That's what your parents are. Your religious beliefs, maybe just because your parents were Baptist, you're a Baptist. You don't really step outside the box and think about it. But I think a crucial piece of life in general for anyone, whether you're a physician or not, is financial literacy. It's not taught really in high school. Your financial literacy comes from your formative years of growing up with your parents. And I feel like if your parents were savers, maybe you're going to be a saver. If your parents live day to day, paycheck to paycheck, you're going to do that. And that's a crucial piece of this because that's such a burden coming out with all of the student loans. But I think I would incorporate that.
Definitely. I mean, the undergrad and then medical student loans that they are accruing account for really nice cars or boats. So or houses, like I always say. It's a mortgage payment. It's a very big debt load. Could you educate us a little bit about the match process? Because as I've learned more and more about it from our partners at Thalamus, GME, it's really convoluted. And I think you and I sat in a session with them earlier this year, and I raised my hand at some point and I said, it is amazing we actually can grow physicians in this country for just how hard it is for them to match and go into something that they're passionate about, et cetera. So maybe give us just the steps that it takes to even get to folks matching and pursuing their residency.
So, of course, beginning of fourth year, your first rotations and as a fourth year medical student, you are going on audition rotation. So that's where it all starts. And it may be a 4-week rotation. It may be a 2-week rotation, whatever the facility allows or whatever that program allows. So you're going in knowing they're going to be watching you and they know they're going to be watching you. So that's where it all kind of starts. You do these rotations. You decide whether that's fit for you or not. You go back and, of course, you rank which programs you would like to match into. And if it's a match, if they rank you number one, you rank them number one, of course, that's an easy match. But I think the hard part of all of it is There are folks who will do things like a suicide match where they want that one program, they don't match, and then they have basically 3 or 4 days to find another program, right? So these programs, they will reach out to them and say, hey, you didn't match. Here's what we have. But it's a very, very, very intense time. And for me, coming from the medical school, it's the best day of some people's life, but it's the worst day of people's lives. So people would always ask us, are you going to have a match party? And we didn't. We did not do it because even if there were one person that didn't match, it's the worst day of their life, right? And so everyone else is celebrating and what have you, but that one person is out there. That's the basic gist of the match. I will say I have worked with tons of students over the years, and they have cried on my shoulder numerous times because they did not match. My advice is, I think sometimes we try to control life and sometimes life controls us. But I think at the end of the day, for the most part, we end up where we're supposed to be. And I will never forget, I had a student several years ago who really wanted one program and ended up not matching and ended up going out west to a program, cried every day until she packed up and left. And I kept saying, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It was a game changer. It was the perfect program for her. Out of anybody I've ever worked with, I think she is probably living her best life more than anyone that I know. And I hope she listens to this podcast. I see she just bought a boat, and every day life is good for her. So, I think it's not the end of the world if you don't match. I think keeping that in mind is huge. And again, I think it's that, Christy, when we talked before about maybe if you came forward and you said, I'm having this problem, it's a ding on your record. Not matching should not be a ding on your record. So don't look at that. If a resident comes in and says, well, this was not my choice at all, that's okay. I think they're where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And I know we learned when we were out the Thalamus GME conference, just how many applications these program coordinators, the programs are receiving, and then that the program coordinators are going through, I don't remember, I think they had 60 slots, and then they received in the thousands, 6,000. It was a phenomenal number of folks that, I'm super excited that they had that level, because we did also hear from rural programs, rural Vermont, I think, not the same case for them, just really hard to find folks that wanted to match with them, live in Vermont and train and et cetera. And I mean, it would be hard for me to go up that far north in the snow, but I think that is something that as recruiters, we have to remember the journey for them isn't a straight line. Like they didn't come out of pre-med undergrad saying, I'm going to be, and then have that actually work out and be what they matched with or what they're happy and successful in.
That's exactly right. It's definitely not a straight line at all. And it's not an easy line at all. So there are some people that have to shift their whole career path at that point. So yeah, that's not easy. That takes a toll on a person for sure. A lot of anxiety there with the match. And it's changed a lot since I left the medical school. It's actually changed a lot. Thalamus has done incredible things.
So I guess, for the recruiters listening, I would encourage you, if you're in that academic setting, you already kind of know some of these dates. But if you're not in that setting and you are trying to talk to folks or walk in their shoes for a little bit, keep those spring dates in mind. If you're doing a match celebration or not, I can understand why you might not. But I've seen some pretty fun ones over the years. But I would tell recruiters, pay attention to those types of things that are happening in your community or in your facility.
And they are fun. I think match day celebrations, they are incredible because that's a huge milestone. Everything is a milestone in this game. Getting into medical school, at that point in your life, that's your biggest hurdle. So you get in. And then passing that first year, that's your next milestone. Everything is such a huge hurdle. Third year, you're walking into a hospital for the first time and doing an actual rotation in a hospital. And then you have your boards. And that's your biggest hurdle yet is, am I going to pass boards? Am I not? And then what's matching into a residency? And there's just one after another until you actually do land that first practice and then get settled. And that's what I love about my podcast is something I typically will ask every single person that's on the program is, if you could go back and face yourself as a first-year medical student, what would you tell yourself to worry about more? And what would you worry about less? And if you could go back and face yourself as a first-year resident, what advice would you give yourself? And I think that's huge. That's a huge, crucial piece of the learning process. So anybody listening will learn just from those two questions alone.
Yeah, no, I think those are great questions. I'm going to flip the script a little bit and ask you kind of that same question. But what's one personal lesson that you've learned through the podcasting, and really probably more impactful is all of those connections that you've had over the years with the students and the residents?
I think just the connection with them, the sincerity, the vulnerability that they show. And I don't know during their journey how many people actually just sit down with them and say, how are you doing? What's going on? Tell me about, whether it's on the podcast or whether we're talking before or after the podcast. I always want to know, how are you doing? What's your struggles? What's going on? Is there anything you need to talk about? Just how willing they are to open up and share that with me. It just puts things in perspective for me. I learn a lot from that. I just truly love it. I truly love it. I think that as I grow older and the residents are younger and younger, they keep my energy level up. Sometimes I travel back to back to back, so I'll be gone, 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and I'll think, oh, I'm tired. But then I go to a resident dinner, and it's like it's just forgotten. I just truly enjoy it. So much to learn, and they are just really willing to open up and talk to you.
We appreciate all that you do to keep assisting, either in the PracticeLink area that we are assisting or just in general as a human. It means a lot. What does thriving in medicine mean to you today?
I think if you're thriving, you've found your purpose. I think you're practicing with purpose. When I give lunch and learn sessions at programs, it sounds so outdated, but a lot of times I will tell them, make your list. Make your list of what are your values? What are you looking for? We're not going to look at pay right off the bat, but we are going to look at a lot of things. And I think involving your family in all of that decision is huge from the start. But I think you're thriving when you have found your purpose and when you've truly landed what meets your values and your goals well beyond just location and pay, well beyond a name. Some people may think, oh, I want to work for this facility because of the name behind it. But there's so many factors outside of that need to align with who you are and what you're truly looking for, what your family's looking for, and how you can thrive with every piece of the puzzle. There's so many pieces beyond that name, that salary, and that location. So I think it's truly looking at who you are and what you want and looking at long term. And I love when it works out. That's my favorite part. I love when it works out. And I see practicing physicians now that I worked with 10 years ago as a medical student, and they are still in the first practice that they ever signed for. And I love that. I love it. A lot of them will come back to a facility where they rotated as a third-year medical student, and it's nowhere near home. And I think it's easy for a lot of residents. You talk to them, or medical students, and I say, where do you want to land geographically? The number one answer is somewhere close to home. And I don't discourage that. I think community and family and all of that is incredible. But I do tell students, you're going to be in residency for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Have you thought about going to Washington State? It's not forever, just for a few years, but think about stepping outside of that box and thinking away from, I'm going home, just because you've always said that. And so I do love that. And, home now, with travel the way it is, you can fly home. Most places you can get home in just a few hours, you can be home. So I think just finding that perfect fit and your purpose, I think when you find that and it all clicks together.
Well, thanks, Charlie. This has been my pleasure to spend this time with you this afternoon. On behalf of myself and PracticeLink, just want to thank you again for joining me and that continued work that you're doing to support our healthcare trainees and clinicians. To our listeners, you can explore more from Charlie's Surviving and Thriving Residency podcast and access valuable resources for residents and recruiters alike in the PracticeLink Resource Center at PracticeLink.com. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, or ideas for future episodes. Just drop us an email at plmedia@PracticeLink.com. My name is Christy Bray, and this has been Workforce Wisdom. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and passion.